A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media bringing you another book review today, so cheers to that. So this time we are looking at the 40th anniversary collection of the G.I. Joe comic book. This was released by IDW. An absolutely fantastic collection of stories, not just in order. We get the first issue, we get the 21st issue, and it kind of jumps around a bit. But that doesn't detract from how great this book is. I'm not going to go into depth with the stories. I will give you like an overview of them, but I'm just going to get right into the next episode of...
Read a fucking book. 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 People.
So this is the 40th anniversary special of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, which comic written by Larry Hama, has been going for a long time. I believe there's over or nearly 300 issues, maybe over 300 issues. So let's take a look at this beautiful edition, released by IDW. We get some text from one of the people that worked on this about how G.I. Joe affected her growing up and the comics and whatnot. Really, really nice read about how she met Larry Hama and how nice of a guy he was and how he would read all the letters that people would send into the comic books, because that was something you did back in the day. You wrote letters to the comics. We start with the very first issue of G.I. Joe. So basically, this is a really great story about Cobra kidnapping this woman who is going to testify. She worked on something called Project Doomsday, realized that the American government wanted it for a weapon, and so she's going to testify before a Senate subcommittee, but Cobra kind of wants her, so they attack the train that she's in, pretending to be reporters, and they get her out of there, and then we get the Pentagon kind of getting G.I. Joe to come and save the day. We get an idea of kind of like the G.I. Joe training area, whatnot. We see some of the famous Joes. There's Scarlet, Snake Eyes. They have to attack Cobra Island, so they make a plan, kind of, do their G.I. Joe stuff. It's typical. I'm not going to go through the stories in detail. I just want to show you the book itself. They create diversions. Fantastic art. Great action. And they ultimately meet Cobra Commander, save the day, of course, and get her back to safety. Even though, in this first issue, I might add, a lot of the G.I. Joes are actually questioning whether or not they should even rescue this woman. They consider her a traitor to America because she's testifying that the military had done something wrong in using her kind of research under false pretenses, which is really interesting, that you have these heroes questioning maybe it would be better if Cobra just killed her and that would solve everyone's problem. It was a really, really good issue. Then we get this kind of side story. The Joes are trying to get a tape. Scarlet and Snake Eyes and this other guy whose name I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. Ripcord or something. Scarlet's been wounded. She demands that they take the tape back, leave her behind. Snake Eyes ultimately sends the dude off, goes back, helps Scarlet. The guy gets the tape there, and then he hurries back to help these Scarlet fight these terrorists. But the G.I. Joes ultimately save their own, and the tape is recovered. So that was just the first issue of G.I. Joe. It's a fantastic issue, fantastic read, full of action. If you've never read a G.I. Joe comic, seen a G.I. Joe cartoon, if you're only familiar with the 2 movies, which, while they did get panned, don't get me wrong, I fucking love them. It's G.I. Joe on the big screen. Who fucking gives a shit, right? Go back and track these things down. Look up the cartoon. Go and read the comics. They are just fun. And you might not kind of get that if you weren't an 80s or 90s kid. I mean, G.I. Joe for me, I grew up on Air Force bases, so it was a natural given that you played with the toys and things like that. It's just fun. That's all it is. This is just a fun comic. And it's fun, I think, because the characters have flaws. That's something that you don't see very often in, like, the first issue. They're questioning their orders. It's just great. Now we move to probably the most famous G.I. Joe comic in history, Silent Interlude. Now, this is famous because there is no text. The reason being that the original comic was lost, and so Larry Hama had to quickly come up with something. Snake Eyes famously doesn't talk in G.I. Joe lore, so he had a Snake Eyes issue. Scarlet has been kidnapped, and we see Storm Shadow here, and Snake Eyes goes in to save her. There is no narrative. There is no dialogue. It is just a completely silent issue, which is awesome. It's a great read. It's a quick read, but it's a fun read. So, to commemorate, they had all of these different artists. You might recognize some. Rob Liefeld is one that I recognize. A few others on there. Recreate this in their own styles. So we get a second version of the silent issue with new art, of course, but follows the same, which is really, really cool. And then we get some information about the silent issue, and then we get the breakdown panels here, which I love stuff like this in graphic novel collections. Okay, we come to issue 24. The Commander escapes. This is where G.I. Joe have actually captured Cobra Commander, and they are kind of making him work for them. We have Destro, the Baroness, and Major Blood, I believe. And they are planning to kind of take over Cobra. Storm Shadow, who is like Snake Eye's rival, is going in to rescue Cobra Commander. We get more great action scenes, and then we see this guy. I believe this is Zartan, maybe? Okay. So this is the origin of Snake Eyes. They are going to attack this hut in the swamp, but we get Snake Eyes' origin and how he is linked to Storm Shadow. So when they come back from the war, everyone's there to meet their family, but Snake Eyes' parents have been killed, sadly. And this is when Duke first meets Storm Shadow. And they train, and Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes train together. But Storm Shadow is jealous and ultimately ends up killing their sensei, thinking that it was Snake Eyes. And that is that. The Battle of Springfield. This is an interesting one. This is basically showing Cobra winning. So Cobra has taken over this town of Springfield. All of their kind of followers are there, and the Joes are attacking it. And this is basically, we get Serpentor. Here, Serpentor was the main villain in the G.I.Joe movie, which those of you that haven't seen it should. It's really cool. Serpentor is a character that was created by Cobra. I believe Dr. Mindbender created Serpentor using all of the DNA of the world's greatest military dictators and creating the ultimate dictator. So the Joes go in and Cobra creates a diversion. The Joes think that they're evacuating from the airfield, but they're not. They're actually evacuating from the high school. Storm Shadow, who was previously killed, has been brought back to life, but he's not the same. So the Joes kind of do their thing, but Cobra outsmarts them, and the Joes then have to take the heat because it looks like they've just attacked an innocent and destroyed an innocent rural kind of city in America. We also get Zarana here, who is Zartan's sister. Now, initially, Larry Hama was not going to make Zarana Zartan's sister, but fans wrote into the comic book and said it'd be really cool if they were brother and sister, and Larry Hama read it, listened, which he often did with the G.I. Joe comics. You will often find that fan suggestions make their way into these stories, and she became Zartan's sister. So this is the 25th anniversary issue. The Cobra are attacking this high-rise building because they have a special weapon that they're creating, like a satellite weapon thing. And the Joes go there to help out. Cobra get very close to basically getting their hands on the weapon, but Hawk and the others kind of manage to stop them, and in doing so, they discover that this guy that they were protecting was the original Joe that G.I. Joe is named after. So we kind of get that little tie in there, which is kind of a great way to end this story. Then we get the yearbook. This just gives you pictures of the villains and heroes and a little bit of backstory, what they can do, a little bit of biography there. So we've got Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes, figure I never had. Cutter, never had Cobra Commander, never had Copperhead. Rock and Roll, never had. Duke, never had. Recondo, never had. Firefly never had. Storm Shadow I had. Storm Shadow I did have as a kid. Thunder never had. Blowtorch never had. Deep Six never had. Roadblock I had. Roadblock is my favorite G.I. Joe character of all time. His figure had this massive plastic gun. It was so cool. Ripcord never had. Baroness never had. Major Blood never had. Wild Weasel never had. Scrap Iron never had. Never had. Never had. Destro never had. Zartan never had. Although I do remember you could get Zartan and Zatanna in a 2-pack, I believe. As for the vehicles, the only G.I. Joe vehicle I had was the Tomahawk Chinook helicopter, which was the 2-bladed helicopter with the open sides, which I got for my birthday one year and was fucking awesome. Okay, let's move on to the pit. This is the G.I. Joe Command Center. So you see all the levels there, the floor plans, things like that. The Mobat tank, the Vamp. Then we get blueprints of the Hiss tank, armored missile. Really, really cool. And that is the 40th anniversary special for G.I. Joe. You already know what I think about this. I absolutely fucking love this book. It was a fun read. It was an easy read if you're a fan of the comics. Larry Hama is just an amazing storyteller. And G.I. Joe was and is an amazing comic book. You still get the nostalgic feelings after all of these years, looking back at the characters and seeing your favorite characters kind of pop up. It was like reading this comic again is like watching an episode of the old 80s cartoon series Mask, where you had your favorite characters and each episode you never knew if your favorite character was going to go on the mission or not. And when they did, you cheered them on like the little Saturday morning cartoon junkie that you were. So, nothing else to say about this. Fantastic read. I would highly recommend checking it out. But most importantly, like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of Plagueland Media's content. We've got some good stuff coming up, some new projects that I will be talking about in the future. But stay safe, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And, of course, please, please, please read a fucking book, people.